Okay, so today I want to talk a little bit about thoughts and how we typically relate to them and how we can learn to work with them in a more mindful way. Um, yeah, this is the kind of conceptual basis for it, but the practice that we'll do after will kind of experientially allow you to take that and have something workable that you can either use as a seated meditation or you can just bring into daily life. Really inviting this versatility. But awareness is the precursor to be aware of how thoughts are coming and going and how we're engaging with them, how we're relating with them is a really powerful space to create within yourself because raise your hand if you think a lot. Yeah, don't lie to me. We're all fucking thinking a lot. I love my teacher says, the mind is like the salivary glands. Like the salivary glands are going to excrete saliva. The mind is going to excrete thoughts. One of the biggest misconceptions in mindfulness, like when people are being introduced to meditation, is the assumption that thoughts are going to go away, that we can just empty our minds. Don't get me wrong, it's possible. It does happen. But the truth is it does take a little time and energy and investment and consistency. And it's not the end goal. And a lot of, I think, what we can get kind of stuck with in mindfulness practice and kind of shoot ourselves in the foot is having the expectation that thoughts are going to go away. And when we're expecting that outcome and it doesn't happen, it's very easy to get discouraged. So what I want to invite is that same energy of like welcoming it all. So we're learning to welcome thoughts. And we're also learning not to be ruled by them. So one of the best analogies is kind of when it comes to how thoughts exist and arise and fall away in the mind is like the sky. So your mindful attention is the blue sky, the awareness, the spaciousness, the noticing of what's going on. And thoughts are like clouds. They come and they go. Sometimes there's little wispy ones and they're not super big deal, and sometimes there's the cumulonimbus ones and those are pretty engaging, and then sometimes there are the storms where you're like completely engrossed. And we experience all different types of thoughts. And I'm sure you can relate to the experience of feeling very ruled by the thinking mind. So, maybe just show me with your hands what your mind, what your sky is like when you have a million different thoughts going on, pulling you in a bunch of different directions. Yes, exactly. It's like it's like the moth hands, okay? Yeah. So that's where, and imagine how exhausting that is for our bodies and our systems. And it doesn't have to be that way. We can learn to relate to thoughts in a way that allows them to more naturally come and go. Because what we end up doing unconsciously is grabbing a hold. We're like riding these clouds, and they will take us far away if we do not recognize and release them. And so in mindfulness practice and these meditation practice, and I was kind of alluding to it in our intro, practice is, when you notice that you're thinking, when you notice that you've been distracted from what you are intending to focus on, you say, oh. And we come back to some sort of anchor. And what we're doing in that practice is we're training our body and our mind to stay here and also to find more of an equilibrium, more of a rootedness here. Not such that we're never going to get caught up in thoughts, but so that we can more readily notice when we've been caught up in thoughts and more efficiently and quickly sort of release ourselves from the attachment. Because there's this intense charge, right? When you have a really like engrossing, intoxicating thought. Like what are some of the most intoxicating thoughts that you'll think?
I think of intoxicating as like good.
Well, if it can feel fucking good,
Okay.
It can feel good to think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So either intoxicating or, I mean that also in the negative sense of like rage can feel very intoxicating. Like fuck this and fuck that, like we can get very intoxicated by that, right?
Got it. Yeah.
But I, for example, like I'm a planner, you know, so I'm thinking about what's coming next, and how am I gonna do this, and like that can be very like, it's almost like fun, but if you really get to the heart of it, it's also exhausting, you know, and you're kind of being hooked in. I'd be curious if you just take a moment to reflect inwardly, like, what are the types of thoughts that are most commonly dominating you energetically? Are they thoughts of worry? Are they thoughts of excitement? Maybe dominating is not the right word, but what are the types of thinking the types of thoughts that are really taking up a lot of space and energy in your mind? Anxiety about the future, planning, trying to figure it out. Again, they can be positive too, looking forward. Can also be looking to the past, regret, or replaying experiences that we really loved. I'd love to hear just from everyone, like, is there a category that speaks to you as something that you know is going on? Yeah?
Yeah, mine are like stress and worry. Like I run stress patterns hard.
Yeah.
And they tend to be like around work and like getting things done and like productivity.
Yeah. Totally normal in this culture. Yeah. Totally normal.
Yeah.
I feel like recently, I think I've already said this, but just self-doubt, but more specifically, just like not being kind to myself. I'm very mean. Mostly repeating things I heard as a child to myself.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah.
And for me, it's finding direction and both defining it and then just working towards it. So specifically, my goals are wealth-oriented and relationship-oriented right now.
Yeah.
So when it's concerned with those two specifically, it goes pretty well.
So you're like thinking and creating and trying to figure things out.
And what can this look like? How do I get there?
Yeah.
Type stuff.
Yeah. And, well, I think what each of us have shared have different sort of obvious, energies about them. None of them are wrong. None of them are bad. Like, Ren's self-doubt is a human experience that everyone in this room experiences way more than I think we would like to. And it's, I think, a natural part of the human experience. And so, really what we're aiming to do here is kind of release our own judgmental charge of whether these thoughts are good or bad and just start to learn to create some space from them and identify them. And ultimately the end goal, or not really the end goal, but the practice evolves. So the practice that we'll do today is to just start to identify, notice, oh, this is happening. Okay, I'm going to come back into the body. And every time that we do that, we're kind of learning to let go. Because you could look at it as the thought is grabbing you, but you kind of don't have any power in that way of looking at it. Really, we're grabbing onto the thought, and we're letting it yank us to faraway lands. So we're learning to let go of the thought. It's not that we don't want to follow certain thought lines, to faraway lands. Especially when you're creating stuff and you're like, this is awesome, and I'm inspired, and I'm going to go, But we're learning. We're learning to have more of, more autonomy over the thinking mind. Rather than being used as a tool by the mind, we're learning to use the mind as the tool that it's supposed to be. And I don't want to get ahead here, but ultimately as we start to work with and practice with thought, we can have more control with it. We can have more of a decision over whether or not we want to continue to think this thought loop. And they do tend to be thought loops, right? They say something like, and I don't know how the hell they measure this, so I don't really care to give you the exact number, but they say that we think 70,000 thoughts a day or something crazy like that. Who knows? But a lot of thoughts. And most of those are repetitive, and most of those are about the past and the future. And most of those are removing us from life as it is here in this present moment. And so while there's value in looking to the future, there's value in reflecting on the past, we're learning to discern a little bit more effectively how much time we want to spend in the future, how much time we want to spend in the past, and really ultimately, if we desire, to spend a little bit more time here experiencing life, where it is in the present moment, in the body. And again, not that thoughts are bad, not that thinking is a problem, but we're just learning to have a little bit more strength in use of thought. And that starts with just creating that space. So the practice that I want to introduce, there are a couple different ways that you can approach it. I want to introduce a way that I've been playing with this past week because I've been really just kind of wanting to... This is all kind of an experiment. You're investigating, you're getting curious, you're noticing things. And the more that you notice things, the more that you'll notice them in daily life. And you realize like, oh, here I am again on that thought loop about yada, yada, yada. I'm going to come back to the thing I'm working on in front of me. And those little moments are like, you just built a fucking muscle. And like that muscle gets stronger over time. And you don't have to sit and meditate. You don't have to medicate. You can medicate, but it's going to kind of avoid the real thing going on. This doesn't have to be a formal seated practice. This is also just something that you can start to pay attention to in daily life. It can be really empowering. But when we notice that we're thinking, we're just going to notice, and we're going to do something called naming. There's a couple different ways that you can name. You can just say, thinking. Very general. I'm thinking again, okay? And then what do? When we notice that, we come back to the present moment. Typically to the body, the breath, could be to what you're drawing, could be to the project you're working on in front of you. We're letting go of whatever that thought was. If you feel like you have some clarity as to what kind of thinking is going on, it can be helpful to categorize it. Oh, there's planning again. Oh, there's an anxious thought. Oh, there's productivity about work. Like you can categorize it in any way that makes sense for you. So it can be kind of generalized or more specific. And then what I want to play with tonight, or honestly, you can do any of these. You don't need to do it this way, but I think it can be really powerful to notice when thoughts pop up, where they are in time. So this is kind of somewhere in between categorization and general I'm thinking, but noticing future thinking, which is anxiety, worry, planning, whatever. There I am in the future. Come back to the body. Or if it's regret or looking back or, doubt about something, hearing a voice from somebody who said something when you were a child, like that is past. I'm past thinking. And we can come back into the present moment. And everything here is here. All of it is here, but the thinking mind makes us think that we're in the future or in the past, and it's actually just, they're clouds passing. And so it can be really powerful to just start to notice and map the territory of how often we get pulled into the imagination of the future, which again is a beautiful thing and something we want to do, but we want to have, autonomy with how we use that. And of course we want to reflect on and appreciate the past, but we don't want to live in the past. We want to live here and now, because that's where all the good shit's going to get created. That's where we're going to feel the most productive. That's where we're going to feel the most creative and artistic and free in ourselves. It's all here, but we get caught up in the shit in our mind. So we'll sit and practice, and we'll use the breath as our anchor, because the breath is here and now. It's physical. It's in the body. It's not, you can't breathe in the future. You can't breathe in the past. Your body doesn't exist in the future. It will exist in the future, hopefully. It doesn't exist in the past. All the sensations, the experience of life through the senses is here right now. And you can be sure about that. So as you're practicing and you're sitting, your mind will drift. And it may drift and you may not even have a fucking clue, because those thoughts are intoxicating, right? And you're under the surface for seconds, for minutes, for hours. And you wake up and you're like, oh, I'm thinking, aren't I? And that's okay. That's okay. That aha, no matter when that comes, is not a moment to beat yourself up for having been lost in a thought, but a moment to celebrate the fact that you realize that you're in thought and to choose to come back to where you want to be. So...
And yeah.
So simply put, we're going to focus on the breath, and anytime you notice that you're thinking, you can note thinking, you can note a category, or as all guided meditation, you're going to note, oh, I'm thinking about the future. Oh, I'm thinking about the past. And then we're going to come back to the breath. And this is a really beautiful way through contrast to learn what it means and feels like to be present. Because I think sometimes we don't have a reference point for what it actually feels like to be present. I mean, we can start to notice, oh, this is what it feels like to be in the future. This is what it feels like to be in the past. We come back like, oh, wow, actually, well, this is what it feels like to be present. This is, I think, where I want to be more. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay? Any questions? You know I put a lot at you. It's okay. All of this is cognitive, and then we're going to embody it and let it sink in, and things are going to pop up days later or in a moment. It's all good. You don't need to have everything perfectly integrated. There's no test. Cool? Okay. So I invite you to get comfy in a way that feels... Talk about the middle way. So both attentive but also relaxed. So you're more than welcome to lay down, and we want to try to find a posture that feels upright and awake, not strained or intense or forced, and yet also in balance with feeling relaxed and easy, but not so much so that we're going to be drowsy. I know you're sleepy over here, and that's okay if you fall asleep. There's no worries. Your body needs what your body needs. We'll start to drop in with a few deep breaths, inhaling through the nose. Letting go and just arriving again into this intentional, non-judgmental, curious, receptive awareness. So you start to sense into the body, again, feeling the body sitting here, laying here. Starting to notice the breath, breathing on its own. And just finding a place that feels like a really natural and comfortable anchor for you in either the breath or the body. So I find it most clear to notice breathing in the expansion and contraction of the belly. If it's helpful, you can put a hand on your stomach just to really make contact with the movement there. And you may also really notice the breath by the nostrils and the upper lip, and really feeling air come in and out. Or maybe it's helpful to just have that general sense of the body sitting here be your anchor, and finding whatever works for you and trusting that you're doing this just right. Seeing if you can settle into the experience of the breath and the body in this moment. And just be here with each passing breath, each passing moment of experience in the body. whenever you notice that you have gotten carried away by a thought or thoughts, you're just going to gently note that. It's this little gentle whisper to yourself inwardly. Thinking. It's a future thought. I'm thinking about the past. And just gently coming back to the breath, coming back to the body. And I'm going to give you some space here to really practice on your own, and I'll offer some reminders to guide you back. Noticing if you're thinking, just naming that, whatever way feels good for you. Coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, coming back to this present moment. Just noticing what's happening right now. If thinking is happening, noting that. Coming back to the breath, this moment. Noticing if you've been carried away, and just letting go the thoughts, even if they're fun ones, just for the sake of practice. Noting the thinking, noting the future thinking or the past thinking, and just coming back, beginning again with this breath, this body, this moment. Noticing if thinking has arisen. You need to judge yourself for thinking. Thoughts be thinking. It's just how it is. Just naming that. Celebrating, noticing it. Coming back to the breath, coming back to the body, to your anchor. Closing up here, letting go of practice, thinking, and just starting to loosen the lens of your awareness a bit. So if you're focusing on the breath, starting to expand into the body now again. Starting to expand your awareness into the space in the room here. Again, hearing sounds. Noticing the quiet in between sounds as a way to feel into the space around you, within you. And to seal your practice, we're going to take one last deep breath, inhaling through the nose, letting it out, and opening your eyes slowly, taking your time to just gaze around the room with a bit of curiosity. Just see if you notice a shift in the way that you're viewing and perceiving the world around you, maybe feeling some freshness. Yeah, getting some movement in, that feels good. Taking your time. There's no rush here.